You're on mute, Tasha.
Thanks, Reggie. So we're really excited about our Virginia wine program tonight. This is one of our programs that we like to call our A to Z chat, which is very informal. This is a really, really interesting topic. And we've got two great speakers. So I encourage anyone who has a question, please feel free to ask. If you don't want to ask yourself, just throw it in the chat and I'll ask the question for you. I'm going to start off by just reading a quick bio for both of our guests, and then we'll just kind of get into our discussion. Tonight, joining us, we have Reggie Leonard and Nia Bates. Reggie co-leads career development at the University of Virginia School of Data Science. When he's not creating connections for students or hosting events, Reggie is a regular on the Charlottesville scene, whether that be the arts, restaurants, tech events, or of course, wine. His discerning palate and accessible commentary, along with his propensity to say, yeah, I'm down, have gotten the wine enthusiast into countless conversations turned collaborations. Reggie is a recipient of the inaugural Welcome cohort of Wine Unify, through whom he pursued a WSET Level 1 certification. He's also earned his WSET Level 2 with distinction, following shortly after. These days, Reggie's moonlighting as a Virginia wine ambassador, working on various collaborative wine projects, and he's helping to build the Oenoverse along with Blenheim Vineyards and other partners in wine. VinePair recently named Reggie one of their VinePair 50 for 2023. Additionally, Reggie is a part of the inaugural Commonwealth Crush Incubator for new winemakers alongside his brother in wine, Lance Lemon, and their wine fam, Jade Marley. Nia Bates is a PhD candidate in the Department of History and Department of African American Studies at Princeton University. She studies 19th and 20th century US history, global environmentalism, and rural cultural landscapes. She earned a BA in African American Studies and an MA in Architectural History with a certificate in Historic Preservation from the University of Virginia. Nia was born and raised in Central Virginia and is a descendant of several families who were enslaved in that area. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, CBS, the Today Show, NBC, and she's been a guest on several podcasts and streaming platforms, including Oprah's Book Club, NPR's All Things Considered, Following Harriet, and many others. Nia has worked in public history, preserving rural African American community history in Central Virginia. In that time, she also served as the director of African American History and the Getting Word African American Oral History Project at Monticello. And of course, Nia is also featured in High on the Hog documentary on Netflix. So we are both very, very honored and proud to have you guys here with us tonight. And thank you for giving us a little bit of time out of your busy schedule.
Absolutely. And thanks for having us. I am really excited about this and love the informal format of this because we really want this to be like a low-key kind of kickback. We'd love to share about our experiences in wine in Virginia, a bit about the history of wine in Virginia and Black folks and people of color kind of in that history. And hopefully some of you all got some wine from us. So I see some head nods, which is good. And so I just want to let you all know that you all can definitely just be drinking that. This isn't like a formal tasting. We're not doing tasting notes and things like that. This is just a way for you to experience some of what we get to experience on a regular basis down here. Quick show of Zoom hands. How many folks have had Virginia wine before? You could either like raise your physical hand or do the thing. Okay, good. There are a lot of folks that have had some, and I've shared Virginia wine with many of you on here, which I love. So I have a little slide deck that I'm going to pull up, and it's not going to be super intense, but really just kind of a way to keep me on track. So I want to share a little bit about some of the AVAs that we have in Virginia, some of the common grapes, a little bit of the folks that are often lauded as a part of Virginia history, and then Virginia wine history. And I want to punt it to Nia from there to share a bit more in depth about a lot of the stories that we don't necessarily hear as often in Virginia wine. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start this slideshow. And what I wanted to do is, what I'm going to do is drop a link to this slide deck in the chat in a bit. And I have some links to the tech sheets for these different wines. So if you really want to know about the winemaking and where the vineyards were, where these grapes were grown and things like that, that'll be a way for you to access the tech sheets. But the reason why I picked these two wines is for a couple of reasons. One, the Michael Schaap's Petit Manseng. Petit Manseng is vinifera. And then the Early Mountain Young wine is made of hybrid grapes. Generally, it's only been Chambourcin this year, which I could not find this wine in shops at all. Like, this wine is not on the shelves in any wine shops yet. So if you got this wine in the mail, you're getting something that's pretty exclusive so far. But it's Chambourcin and Vidal Blanc co-fermented, which are both hybrid grapes. It's usually chilled. You can definitely drink it at cellar temp. I wouldn't necessarily recommend drinking it kind of at room temp in 2023. Cellar temp back in the day was like 55 degrees or so. It'll still be fine if you're drinking at room temp, but it'll be even better if it's cellar temp or colder. The reason why I picked Petit Manseng is because we are in Virginia, the place with the second most plantings of this grape in the world. The first is the Jurançon in France, and it's often a sweet wine there. Sometimes it's dry or off dry, but it's usually known as a sweet wine. Whereas in Virginia, it's made in all types of styles. The style that you have is kind of reductive. It's dry. It's very textural because of a lot of lees stirring, and it actually has 5% Roussanne that was planted right next to the vineyard where the Petit Manseng is. That's as techie as I'll get about the wines. The tech sheets are, in the chat or in the comment section of the doc that I'll drop in the chat in a second. But I wanted to kind of orient you all to how many wineries there are in Virginia. And one of the things that I like about Virginia wine, especially where we're at now, I'll kind of talk about that towards the end, but is really we're in this discovery phase of figuring out what works here. And a part of that allows us to kind of shed a lot of traditional wine convention. And so cideries and meaderies are listed in parentheses here. But if you talk to the folks that are producers here, you'll hear people talk about wine, period. And you'll hear them talk about grape wine, apple wine, honey wine, etc. It's all made the same way. It's all wine. We don't draw a distinction between mead and cider in hard ways like many other regions do, because it's all wine. It's just made out of different fruits. And that's a big part of some of the history of like us fermenting things for a very long time. And so I'm not going to read all of the stats on here, but saying this to say that there are a lot of wineries, a lot of grapes, and a lot of opportunities in Virginia wine. So a little bit of the way that the Virginia Wine Marketing Office tells the wine story of Virginia is what you can see on this slide. And it's interesting to hear how differently they talk about wine versus the way that I've talked about wine with Naya and some of the folks on this call. So one of the things that is often lauded in Virginia wine history is Thomas Jefferson bringing a lot of French vines and Italian vines back from Europe and trying to plant them here. It is commonly known that they didn't really take off the way that he meant to, but it's still romanticized that he brought those wines and those vines here as a big part of the story of Virginia. A story of not success is not necessarily the version of the story that I think needs to be emphasized. And so that's one of those points where we have a lot of space to kind of insert ourselves and be a part of the new story of Virginia wine. And then I'm just going to skip through a couple of slides really quickly. You'll have this as a point of reference, but these are some of the ways that Virginia wine is often talked about. Words like the father of Virginia wine, which Gabriele Rouse all love. Like, my dude planted so much. Naya, I'm definitely going to ask you to talk about Gabriele. Actually, can I just get you to talk about Gabriele a little bit now?
Oh my gosh, yeah, we love Gabriele, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Gabriele is the father or the godfather of Virginia wine. He came here from his hometown across the globe in the 70s and helped establish Virginia's first commercial vineyards, including Barbersville. Since then, I think Gabriele's been involved with establishing something crazy like over 40 different vineyards in Virginia. So a major part of the industry here. And while he was doing that, he was also director of gardens and grounds at Monticello. So he's been responsible for restoring a lot of heirloom varieties of different vegetables and fruits grown here in Virginia that would have been prevalent during Jefferson's lifetime, and then making sure that those heirloom varieties are stewarded. So he's been part of our seed exchange program and many other things. So Gabrielle's been multi-talented for sure. And I think he just recently retired from Monticello, so he may be pouring himself fully back into the wine world.
Fingers crossed, because what is he, like 90, 80, late 80s?
He's definitely in his 80s, for sure in his 80s.
Yeah, and I just see him at wine shops, like buying cheese and wine. And I'm like, all right, that's what I hope to do when I'm in my late 80s. And so some of these other oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you got it.
Yeah, I was just going to say some of these other folks are some of the early pioneers in Virginia wine as an industry and really establishing it. And so it's almost this kind of unsuccessful start with Thomas Jefferson, and then a successful start that really started with Gabriele Rousset planting Barbersville vineyards. And there was a what's it called, book that was just released, or maybe it was some kind of magazine or periodical or something that is 150 wineries you must visit before you die in the world or something like that. I just saw it pop up today because Philip Papato over in Portugal posted it, and so I was scrolling through the wineries to see which ones were listed in the Americas, and I did see Barbersville listed in there, which was pretty cool, and Gabriele planted that. And so that was really in the kind of late 80s, early 90s, where this new current wave of Virginia wine that we now know, and for the folks who love Virginia wine, that really started around that time frame. I'm not going to read through all of these people's bios. These are all going to be in the slide deck, but I just wanted to have these here as a point of reference for folks who are interested a bit more in the historical piece. And then some of the grapes that we grow right now in terms of the volume of plantings that are in Virginia, you can see on these slides. So primarily vinifera and Vidal Blanc as well, which is a hybrid. And then Norton is arguably a Virginia native grape. I've heard it increasingly argued a little bit more in the last few months, but it still seems to be lauded as a native Virginia grape. Naya, I don't know, do you know anything about Norton at all? Cool.
Nope.
I didn't be missing something. And so like a lot of these are kind of secondary is how they've been talked about, Bordeaux varietals like the Petit Verdot of the world, Merlot, and things like that. But Cabernet Franc is by and far our largest red planting, and Chardonnay our largest white planting. And then here's just a quick little chart of some different vineyard plantings kind of at a meta level. So you can look at vinifera versus hybrid, and then just straight up American grapes. So that would include like Norton, for instance, which is vinifera, but is an American grape variety as well. And then you can see the chart in the bottom left that shows a little bit more of some of the things that are planted. One of the fun things about Viognier is that it's not something that vineyard managers like to grow at all, but a lot of marketers really like to market Viognier. And a part of it is because it kind of looks like Virginia-ish, like when it's written out. And so that's really a part of what made Viognier popular, but winemakers don't love growing and making Viognier. Some winemakers will tell you that they love making it, but most will tell you that they don't. And so you're seeing decreasing amounts of Viognier, or Viognier with skin contact, or people blending Viognier with Roussanne and things like that, just trying different things with it. I've even seen a pet nat of Viognier from Bowdoin Young up in Northern Virginia in Loudoun County coming out of Walsh family vineyards. And so really Virginia is kind of ripe for the changing, the picking, and the experimenting is really what I would say. And then here's a map of the different AVAs that are in Virginia, not super high quality, but if you go to Virginia Wine's website, you'll be able to see a higher quality of it, but it does show you a broad range of AVAs. Right now, the AVAs aren't necessarily geological. It's more the first AVA was created by one of the women who was on the first slide. I forget Felicia's last name, but it was Felicia something. And she created the first Monticello AVA. And so those are our AVAs. And then I wanted to pass it to Naya here to share more about the history of Black folks, in wine and fermentation.
Yeah, thank you, Reggie. We always talk about this, right? But one of the things that actually got me into wine is my own family's kind of history of fermenting things. My grandfather grew grapes. They also fermented pears, peaches, plums. I mean, basically anything that grew on this land, they would turn into alcohol. And my family was having a great time. We used to run a speakeasy. So I kind of entered through that history, and then working at Monticello, learned exactly how extensive that story really is. I mean, from the 18th century forward, enslaved people have been part of this space. And so, a lot of people enter the story of Monticello through James Hemings and his history of fine French cuisine produced at Monticello after an extensive training in France. But it's really people like Ursula Granger and Francis Hearn and Peter Fawcett and Edith Fawcett, who were enslaved chefs at Monticello, but also, distilled and brewed their own alcoholic beverages, who really ensured that this tradition survived. And so I've had the great opportunity to learn some more about those folks. And basically, in 18th century Virginia, the water was not safe. And while they didn't have the scientific understanding to know that it was caused by bacteria and other things from contaminated water supply, they did know well enough not to drink a lot of the water. So they were drinking a lot of low alcohol meads and ciders that kind of allowed them to stay hydrated, but also were fermented beverages. And so it's a big part of the lives of enslaved people at Monticello and surrounding plantations in the surrounding area. And I think when we think about the legacy of that moment, I think we still see that in a lot of Black communities, right? Like my grandfather learned to make dandelion wine and other things from his grandmother, who certainly learned that from people who were formerly enslaved. And so it's a long standing tradition in our communities to do this.
Love it. And like I'm thinking about like when we when Naya and I first connected in person, because we had connected over Zoom initially. And I met at Naya's house on the porch with our boy James. And we talked about doing a happy hour, and I brought 4 bottles of wine just in case. Like I was like, if we don't like one, we can go to another one. And I'm probably gonna be here for like an hour because like we haven't kicked it like that. And it got there at like 5. Left at what, like 11:45 at night on a work night. I mean, we drank all the wine. Naya found another bottle. Like then we opened the Uncle Nearest, and then we started talking about like these histories of fermentation. And Naya started talking about moonshine, and she was like, "Matter of fact, I might have some in the fridge from my granddad." And then she pulled it out and like poured some in a spoon and lights it on fire, and it's like, "You see how you don't see anything?" I'm like, "Yeah." And she was like, "That's because there are no impurities in here. And if you see a blue flame or something," and I was like, "This is wild." It was, but it's like, this is what we do. These are the experiences that we get to have. These are the connections that we get to make over conversations had over wine, but also just conversations kicking it with each other. And it was cool that wine just happened to be a proxy, the thing that brought us together to have that conversation. It does sound like an episode of Drunk History, Sierra. So I wanted to, like, sorry, from a slide deck perspective, I'm kind of skipping a little bit, but share this quote that came from the Silicon Valley Bank report from 2022, which we all know what happened to their bank. Unfortunately, they went bankrupt. But this is one of the things, the insights that they shared, just this notion of attracting younger consumers really kind of hinges on reimagining and redefining our audience, hiring practices at wineries, dress codes of when you experience wine, etc. And I really think that like this is a big part of the story of the new wave of Virginia wine that's coming up, this ethos of just being open to try new things. And so some of the new grapes that you'll see more and more plantings of are these right here. Some of these grapes were referenced on the other slides, but what wasn't referenced on the other slides is the rate of growth of the plantings of these grapes. And so even though they may be low relative to the other vinifera that you saw in the slides, Albarino is the fastest growing planting of grapes in Virginia, for instance. And Chambourcin and Chardonnay are starting to be planted more. Cabernet Franc is starting to be done in new styles. One of the styles that I'm most excited about that just got bottled and is going to be released for the first vintage ever coming in September is at Grace Estate. Some of y'all might know Noe Garcia, who's done some stuff with us in Virginia and Oenoverse, and he's one of the vineyard managers there. And they're doing Cab Franc and Slovenian oak. And that's what they do over in Italy for a lot of the Barolos and things like that. And it's just really compelling, savory, different style of Cab Franc. So there are all of these different things that are starting to happen in Virginia, grape-wise. And then here are just some of the people, that many of you all are probably familiar with. Some of you may not be, but that who are really pushing the envelope in terms of moving us forward. Lee Campbell is a Somm from New York and someone who's created so many restaurant lists and mentored so many people, who decided to take her talents from New York and bring them back to Virginia recently to open up the tasting room for Commonwealth Crush, and to run the incubator program that I'll tell you all a bit more about. Ben and Tim Jordan are winemakers who started Commonwealth Crush. They're brothers. I always say that the only Jordans I collect are their wines. That's a lie. I also like some ones as well. Walsh Family Vineyards is also doing really dope stuff up in Loudoun County. Robbie and Noe are doing stuff at Grace Estate. Kendall, he's been working Harvest and at various different wineries on the production side. I mean, like I want to get these folks' names on the tape because these are that's the go-go in me. That's PG, sorry. But I want to get these folks' name on record so that you all can know who to look out for, who to be building community with. I mean, half of y'all on this call, shoot, y'all should be on this list as well, which is why I said it's not exhaustive. But these are some of the folks that are really supporting the future of the industry, both from an inclusion perspective and also just from a pushing the science and the grapes and things like that forward. And these are some producers that are doing some really cool things too, to keep an eye out, that are kind of small projects. Yeah, and like Naya said in the chat, Lee is that woman. Lee is fire. She is Lee Campbell's dope. And then what I wanted to end with is on a super tactical note, and in terms of the slides, the Commonwealth Crush Incubator is something that I want to talk to y'all about. So I told the Virginia Wine Marketing off. Yep, Lance Lemon is Kelly Lemon's little brother. I see that in the chat. And he's also his own person, but yes, they are related in that way. And Commonwealth Crush is a new custom crush facility that's based in Waynesboro, a super small town in Central Virginia, about 30 minutes away from Charlottesville over the mountain. And what they're doing is taking on clients who want to make custom label wines and things like that. But also what they did was launched an incubator where they wanted to get folks from traditionally underrepresented backgrounds in winemaking, which is very heavily people of color and absolutely women and non-binary folks as well. Like they wanted to get 2 projects started. And so the first 2 projects are going to be by Jade Marley and by Lance Lemon and I. And so Lance and I are making a project together, and so is Jade. She's doing a separate one. What an incubator means is, in this case, and the reason why I want to tell y'all all of these things is because y'all can do all of this stuff. And so all of these things are things that are accessible to you if you're interested in exploring Virginia wine further. So the incubator model is we don't have to pay anything up front to make a wine. And so no cash up front. And when we cover the cost of what we need to pay them back, it's only going to be cost. So they're donating labor, the winemakers there. So Ben and Tim Jordan are the kind of owners, but Ben is the lead winemaker. And then Zach is the assistant winemaker there. And so basically no upfront cost. They sourced the grapes for us. They bought the grapes for us. They put them under contract and paid the folks and everything like that. We told them what type of wine we wanted to make. We worked with them to figure out what kind of grapes we wanted to use. And I mean, Lance has already visited our Tanat up at Walsh Family Vineyards in Loudoun. And so we're planning on being in the vineyard throughout the growing season when we can. We'll also be working the production side of that harvest and actually being as hands-on as possible while we're making those wines. We both live in different cities and are working different jobs. And essentially what we're going to do is we're actually not even going to have to pay back that money, because we're going to figure out a way to fundraise for it. And so the new model of the incubator now is that all of the projects will be fundraised for in some form or fashion, so that you actually don't come out of pocket at any point during the production of your first run of wine. And that way it makes it a bit more financially viable for you to make a second project the following year. And so it's a really cool way for people who are interested in getting into winemaking to do so without having to buy a vineyard, plant grapes and all of that sort of thing. Of course, it's not open to any and all. It's too good of a deal to do that. So it's really kind of an application, not quite a formal application process, but it's definitely an expressing some interest. Lee will have a conversation with you, Lee Campbell, who we've been talking about, and kind of figure things out from there. And they're looking to do a couple of projects per year. Also, if you're interested in getting Virginia wine into distribution in your area, or getting more wines or different wines, I definitely can talk to you all about that as well. But actually, I'm just going to go ahead and put the slide deck in the chat now. And you all should be able to see like different distributors who carry Virginia wines in different states. Also, there's an opportunity to buy land. And I don't have like a piece of land that I'm saying there's an opportunity to buy. I'm just saying that Virginia has land, and y'all can buy it. And one of the things that I worked with the Commonwealth Crush crew on doing is expanding their incubator to land. And so if you're interested in exploring buying land or even planting land that you or your family might have in Virginia or have access to, they'll actually do free consulting for you all, and for any of us who are interested in doing that. And so that's something to keep in mind as well. And then also you can come to Virginia to work harvest internships. The Virginia Governor's Cup is just a big event for you to get a chance to taste a lot of Virginia wines, like well over 100 Virginia wines, and that comes up in early March. So tickets don't go on sale until October, but I'll let you all know if you're interested, how to get those tickets. But also there's a trade email listserv that's in the comments of this particular slide, in the slide deck. And then a couple of things that I wanted to mention too are Oenoverse. And so Oenoverse is the organization that I co-founded, and we're really trying to create more space in Virginia wine by creating opportunities like Eno Camp on the previous slide, and Two Up Wine Down. And Eno Camp is where we brought close to 20 folks around the country, regionally and West Coast and in between, to really learn and do a deep dive into Virginia wine. And so that's something that we'll do every year. And we do that in the summer, like in June. So we haven't put out applications or anything for the next year's version, but that's a great way to learn about Virginia wine. We bring you here from wherever you are, so reimburse gas, fly you, whatever it takes to get you here. And we put you up in a hotel room and, do winery visits and all that kind of stuff. And then Two Up Wine Down is on October 29th. And it's our big wine festival that we have at the Jefferson School, where Naya is on the board of the African American Heritage Center. And yeah, those are a couple of ways that you all can get involved in Virginia wine. And I wanted to see if Murray and or Janelle might be interested in sharing a little bit about the Oenoverse Club event that y'all are going to be doing. Janelle or Murray, do y'all feel up for saying something?
Yeah, for sure. So Janelle and I are going to be co-hosting Oenoverse on October 15th. So that's another opportunity to be able to come out. We'll have a chance to share stories. If you join the Oenoverse, you'll also be able to get the 4-pack of wine that the two of us will select together. You'll get 2 tickets to come out to the tasting. It should be a good time. We're going to likely be outside under the tent in the nice October weather. So it should be an amazing event, and hopefully folks will be able to come out and join us. Anything else you want to add, Janelle?
No, I think that's it. So come do Oenoverse with us, and then Two Up Wine Down, and 2 more weeks after that.
And it's awesome because it's it's a club. The Oenoverse Club is, we have the Oenoverse Club, we have Two Up, One Down, we have Eno Camp. They're all kind of separate entities. And the Oenoverse Club is $65, and you get 4 bottles of wine plus 2 tickets to an event with chef pairings. And each of those 2 tickets comes with 4 glasses of wine, and we're generous with the wine. It's not just 4 glasses; it's however much you want. And every time you, and it's at Blenheim Vineyards. And anytime you go to Blenheim, you also get a free tasting for you and a friend with the membership, and you get 15% off your purchases. And so it's definitely one of those like Costco loss leaders, but where like we're not making money off of it at all. Like the goal of it is to get people to join their first wine club, or just come out and hear from folks who they don't get to hear from in Virginia Wine. So that's the vibe there, and that's Lance and I's picture for our project. We're calling it the Parallax Project, and parallax is kind of this way of seeing the same thing in multiple different ways. Like, if you hold something in front of your face, you close your eye and then you open it and close the other eye. Like it looks like it shifted perspective, even though you held it in the same place. That's this parallax effect. And so what we're going to do is a crazy co-ferment of Chardonnay and Tannat. So we're doing a hybrid and a vinifera grape, and we're doing it 2 different ways. We're doing a red and we're doing a white. The red is going to be light bodied, hopefully. And then we're doing a white where we're just pressing off the Tannat juice from the skins before it gets any skin contact. And we're fermenting that white juice with the white juice from Chardonnay. So 2 different wines out of the same 2 grapes, both co-fermented, but 2 different ways, like a parallax. And we're naming them after a lyric from a Currency song. And Currency said, I pulled up into what's this, I came back into what's that. And so we're calling the wine a what's this and a what's that. And we're calling the 2-pack a stunt double pack. And so keep an eye out for that. That's going to be our wine. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can just see each other. And yeah, that's a little bit of the tea on Virginia wine. What are some questions y'all have, or some thoughts you have, or ideas that you have? And Naya, feel free to dive in if you have any additional thoughts to share too.
No, I don't have any additional thoughts. I'm looking forward to that project with you and Lance. My favorite people on the planet doing something together.
I love it.
But I guess, while people are thinking of, their questions, ideas, responses to what we presented, I think this opportunity to invest in land is really special. I mean, I come from a background of historic preservation, so I'm interested in Black landscapes, historic Black places, and how we reclaim space. But I think taking up space, especially in an industry that kind of thrives on the idea that Black people and people of color are not part of that history, is particularly disruptive. Like, it's exactly what we need in Virginia right now. So yeah, I'm just thrilled that the Commonwealth Crush Incubator is going to allow for that, but also excited for more places to visit. I mean, I love hopping in the car and hitting up all the spaces. So looking forward, because I know people on this chat will invest and will get into the land movement.
So Naya, speaking of the land, are you seeing that there is a resurgence now of more Black Americans going back into being interested in farming and agriculture?
Absolutely. I think the pandemic really shifted things. I mean, we know historically Black farmers have not received the same level of investment from the state or federal government in terms of the ability and the opportunity to purchase land and equipment and other things. But I think for many reasons, Black Americans are moving away from cities and returning back to family home places, reclaiming land that is ancestral for them and for us, right? And so I think, especially in the last 10 years, I would say a lot of communities are seeing a resurgence of Black people moving into the area. And I'll just speak about Albemarle County. Like, I moved back into my grandparents' house. This is the house that my grandfather built in the 1930s. And we've always had this land, and it has old grapevines on it. And I'm looking forward to making this space productive. But I look around my community and I see people who moved away, whose families moved away, you know, in the Great Migration and other parts of history where there were better opportunities in the cities, are now starting to return as the elders transition away from these places. And so I think we have an opportunity then to make sure that what wealthier communities have already benefited from, right? I mean, certainly in Albemarle, all of the former plantations have been converted. Many of the former plantations have been converted into vineyards. That there's also opportunity for us to benefit on this return to farming, rural living, farm to table, you know, food and other things. And so, yeah, I do think there is tremendous opportunity and growth with Black people returning to farming.
Do you find that that's a hard conversation to have with people about reclaiming specifically land that, because I'm from Charleston, South Carolina, and I know this is always a serious topic amongst, you know, my family and people that also grew up from Charleston, is the whole plantation. And, you know, there's an emotional connection that's, you know, very negative. So is that a hard conversation to have, getting people to understand the importance of reclaiming that land and what that looks like in a way that it's not, you know, a negative thing when it comes to our history and, you know, enslaved people in this country?
It is a hard conversation. You know, I was at a conference last week in Nashville, Tennessee, hosted by the African American Association of Museums, and I was on a panel about a memorial to enslaved people that we just completed at Monticello. And part of that conversation, one of the architects on the project, Thomas Waltz of Nelson Bird Waltz Landscape Architects, said something that I think is really relevant to this. And he said, you know, developers and other people tend to look at the land like it's empty, but all land is full. All land carries the trauma of the past, the history of the past, hopes and dreams and aspirations of people who were marginalized within landscapes. And so I think as we as Black people looking back at our history, I think there's been a shift that people are starting to take pride in the labor of those enslaved people and the skill and the knowledge that they possessed of not only growing crops and doing agriculture under severely oppressive and violent and disturbing circumstances, but that we're also able to see that there was a lot of genius in what they were doing, that there's a lot of knowledge and skill and other things that we can take from those experiences to lift up. And so I think with all the pain and the hardship that we associate with slavery, there's also space for us to celebrate our connectivity with the land and the environment. And I think about the South in particular, and I'm sure this is true in the North, but certainly in the South, if you throw away all of the land that was formerly controlled by plantations, that would leave next to nothing, right? And we can't afford to do that. As a people, we need the land, we need food, we need sustenance, we need resources, we need all of the things that these natural environments provide. And so I think it's actually more empowering for us to think of how we can heal the land and how we can heal ourselves by returning to the land. I think we've lost a lot by moving away from agriculture and producing our own food and our own beverages and being in control of that ecosystem. As I think many of us are seeking therapy and doing yoga and looking at other holistic ways to heal ourselves, that returning to the land has got to be near the top of that list, no matter where it was located.
We had a question in the chat about finding out more information on the October.
Oh, yeah, thanks for flagging that. Yeah, it'll be, I'll drop the link in the chat. It'll be on the Oenoverse Club website.
And ticket sales haven't gone up yet. And I don't know if the date is on the site yet, but it should be there soon. So I'll definitely let you know, Keith.
So Reggie, for some of our members who maybe haven't had an opportunity to try Virginia wines, outside of some of the producers that you named, are there any others that are good mention that they should look out for?
Yeah, there's so many. Gosh, there are a lot of good ones. Actually, for some of the folks who are familiar with Virginia wine, who are some of the ones that y'all would recommend? Feel free to like either drop it in the chat or come off of mute. Love to crowdsource some stuff.
So I'll come off mute. If you have not tried Rosemount Vineyard, it's in a small town called La Crosse, Virginia, where I'm from. It's amazing.
My mom lives in Lawrenceville.
Oh, so we're probably cousins, Reggie.
Yeah, that's wild. I was out at Rosemount not that long ago.
Oh, yeah.
See Hark in the chat.
Yeah, I'll drop some in the chat also.
Yeah, Veritas Sauv Blanc. Yeah, Veritas is fire. Sunset Hills is dope. What is it? The Vidal Blanc in that young wine red that y'all have is grown at Sunset Hills, actually. Linden is fire. Yep. Yeah, Linden has this red and this white called Hard Scrabble. And it's pretty, I was gonna say it's pretty high end, but I don't know. Like I feel like y'all drink Burgundy and like Napa wine, so it might not be that high. I feel like I'm gonna call with fancy people. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, the Linden stuff is great. Yeah, Horton, Eastwood. Yep, RDV is the high end stuff. All right, Will is out here trying to be allocated and making it rain and all that. Like, don't they give you Krug when you go to the tasting? Like, I'm not even exaggerating. Yeah, like when you go to a tasting at RDV, you start with Krug champagne.
Have you met Will? Have you met Will? Do a tasting at RDV.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, Sweet Vines in Unionville. Yep, like we're working on getting Sweet Vines to 2 Up Wine Down this year, along with 5011 Wines as well. Yeah, there's so many. I love it. This is hilarious, Brittany. I would also say, I mean, you all got the wine from Early Mountain, the young wine, but they also make Cab Francs, Petit Manseng, they make sparkling, they make a lot of different wines. And their executive chef, Tim Moore is great. He was the sous chef at the Inn at Little Washington, which has 3 Michelin stars. And now he's the executive chef at Early Mountain. So the wine and the food game is crazy. And it's owned by Steve and Jean Case, really Jean Case. And Steve Case founded AOL back in the day. So there's a tech connection too. Oh yeah, Chrysalis, they're Viognier. Yeah. And they also have
I'm trying to, okay, so has Early Mountain has Early Mountain expanded? Because I remember the last time when I went there, it was like a little tasting room on top of a tree almost. I don't know.
Oh, it's been a little while. How long ago did you go?
Before
Have you
COVID.
been in the last few years? Okay.
It was before COVID.
Okay, yeah, it's pretty big. And it's very much a wedding venue, like very ornate, like beautiful outdoor area in the meadow.
Okay.
And then
I mean, it was
the
good
indoor
then. I'm
areas
just
there.
saying, when you all were talking about like the restaurant and all that stuff, and I was just like, I was like, oh, that wasn't there before.
Yep. There are a lot of things in Virginia wine that are changing very rapidly, which is exciting. What other questions do y'all have, or what else? Yeah, sorry, Deanna.
I have a question for Reggie or Anaya, like working a full-time job and getting into the wine industry. Like I work part-time at a winery now, but like hearing you talk about things like getting into production and harvest, like how do you balance that? Or how have you balanced that, if you have?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Because that's actually something that I think about a lot, because I do work full time at UVA in a non-wine at all field. And so it is nice that I live close to a vineyard. You're not that far from Rosemont?
Well, I live in Maryland now, so I
cool.
work at Old Westminster, which is like 30 minutes
Oh,
for me. So I'm able
yeah.
to, yeah. So that's why, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, so I during the production side of Harvest, I worked every Saturday and Sunday throughout Harvest. And then when there were times where I could go in before work to pick grapes if they were doing early picks, or go after work, I would show up. I worked during growing season as well. So all of the leaf pulling and shoot thinning and pruning and all that good stuff whenever I could. Again, like after hours, there was a lot of work that I could just do on my own without having to have any of the winemakers or vineyard managers there. So I could just show up and go into the vineyard and like have a list of tasks to do. So that was like a way that I got to do some of that. But it is tough, and it is figuring out kind of how much you really want to dive into that side of things. For me, I don't see myself fully going into the production side of wine, but I always want to have that as a thread of the way that I connect to wine, because for me, to Naya's point about just kind of that connection to the land piece, it's just like super important for me. And it's where Lance and I met. We literally like met in the vines. Like it was crazy. I mean, we saw each other and it was like, it felt like an oasis. I was like, it's another Black man in a field of vines doing grape stuff. Like, this is crazy. And so we literally, that first day, we were like, we got to do something, man. We got to do something. And that was in 2020. And so here we are about to make a wine with each other. So we're doing something. So sometimes it takes a little time too.
Thanks for that. Appreciate
Right.
it.
And I've always worked like multiple things at a time. I always have too many things going on, whether it's grad school or working in museums or consulting with communities on how to get a historic highway marker or like preserving Rosenwald schools. I'm always like in too many things. But I feel like I have cobbled out space to be involved in wine on a seasonal basis, right? So a lot of the small vineyards around Charlottesville are always looking for help, either at harvest or when it's time to bottle and label things. So I've made time to help put labels on wine at Sugarleaf, that is now Wisdom Oak Winery. I was able to help harvest at Monticello, mainly because Gabrielle was there and we were coworkers. So they were picking at 7 a.m. So I would pick for a little bit and then do my full-time job and then come back out after the full-time job after I had the opportunity to do that. So I've experienced a lot of different aspects of the wine. To the point where I briefly entertained the idea of running a wine tour company part-time. I was driving my friends around on the weekend, and I felt like, well, if I'm going to do it anyway, maybe I should start charging people. And I did that, up until the pandemic. So I think there are a lot of different little ways that you can test out different areas of the industry to see, what you're most passionate about, where you want to be involved. But there are so many different ways, I think, to be either deeply plugged in or just picking the pieces around the edges, which is kind of what I've done over the past 5 years.
And I was going to add too, one of the new things that I'm going to be doing is I work remotely on Mondays and Fridays. And so I'm just going to start doing that from the Commonwealth Crush tasting room. So they're not open on Mondays and they're not open during the day all the time on Fridays. And so I'm just going to be kicking back and like on little breaks, like I can pop over into the cellar and see what's up and hear some stuff and things like that. So even thinking about non-traditional stuff like that might be helpful and just put you in proximity to conversations and allow you to become a regular somewhere as well.
Right. And get to know people, right? Talk to the people who are pouring, talk to the owners when you get the opportunity. Everybody is fairly friendly and open. So no bad ways to get in. I might tag along with you, Reggie, out to Commonwealth on the off hours. Maybe I can write my dissertation out there.
Yes.
That was a great point to bring up, though, because I think a lot of people deal with that, really wanting to follow their passion. But, we have to be honest, we still have responsibilities as adults. So it's very difficult. And sometimes you feel frustrated and defeated with it. But I think communities such as this, where you're able to kind of express that and know that it's not just you. It's not you that's doing something wrong or you that's not working hard enough. It's something that a lot of people are struggling with and juggling at the same time. So, there is that support there. But like Naya said, you just have to kind of carve out that space where you can find it. And, whatever that looks like for you, and then, work towards whatever your goal is, even if that's just a slow, a slow journey. But yeah, that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with, and don't realize that it's a commonality that we all have. So Naya, can you talk a little bit more about some of the things that you've learned being a historian at Monticello, just some of the connections that the ancestral connections that we have to Central Virginia that a lot of us who are not from that area may not even realize. I know that there are a lot of people who are just, learning about Chef Hemmings. So what are some of the other historical facts that you've uncovered throughout that journey?
Oh gosh, where to start? That is such a good question, first of all, but there are so many different ways. And first of all, I'll say, Virginia, at least among historians, is known for being kind of the mother of slavery. And that is a very dubious and terrible claim to fame. But it also means that the majority of Black Americans living in the United States whose ancestors were enslaved here have some connection to Virginia. Virginia was very different during slavery than, say, Mississippi, Louisiana, Florida, right? Virginia, as part of the Upper South, had different economic circumstances such that the labor required to grow crops like wheat and tobacco, which were the two major cash crops in Virginia, was a lot less than indigo or rice or cotton that were more prevalent in the Deep South. So that set up circumstances where Virginia became known for slave trading. That means many people ancestrally have at least one ancestor who's Virginian at birth. And so there's that kind of very literal ancestral tie. But I think there are also just cultural things that maybe are not readily associated with Virginia, like mac and cheese and ice cream, which is what I talked about in the High on the Hog episode. James Hemmings went to France in the 1790s with Thomas Jefferson, was trained by a French chef, Honoré Julien, to cook in the French style. And when he returned to the US, two of the dishes that become famous because of Monticello and because of Hemmings establishing a precedent for fine dining and fine service of cuisine are mac and cheese and ice cream. And so I think in many ways, a lot of what we readily associate with Black soul food and our traditions of braising meat and slow roasting things over an open fire, of cornbread, of one pot dishes. So gumbo, jambalaya, those types of things. All of that comes from enslaved people, and so there is a lot of that as well that links back to the history of Virginia. So I think there are so many different ways that we can all look to Virginia and look to Central Virginia in particular for these types of connections. And so if you're a foodie and you love food, I'm sure there's something here for you in Central Virginia as well. But yeah, I think there are those kind of tangible elements. And then, just spiritually, like the first enslaved Africans arrive in Virginia. And that's up for debate. Of course, there were enslaved people who arrived in what became Florida as well by the Spanish, much earlier than those who arrived in Virginia. But the date that people rally around is that 1619 date. And so Virginia is our home, so we should reclaim it.
Mm-hmm. Are you finding that there's a foodie scene that's just like it seems like to be a wine boom right now? Do you feel like there's a foodie scene that's kind of following along with that?
100%. I mean,
Yeah,
Lance
for sure.
And Kristen own a restaurant, fantastic restaurant in Richmond called Penny's. So if you ever get a chance to go to Penny's, check it out. But yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure Reggie can speak more to that foodie vibe.
I'll be outside. There's a lot of food. There's a lot of really good food all over Virginia, including in Charlottesville, but like all over the state. I mean, so much. And I see Jamel's hand up too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Question.
I just had a quick question about, I guess for you, Reggie, for you too, Naya. I guess you mentioned that Albarino is kind of like that grape that's kind of, making its wave, and that's what growers are really into. Like, is that the grape that you're most excited about, or what grape are you kind of like excited about, or the future of, I guess, as it comes to Virginia wine? I know you
Yeah, I
mentioned
mean, it's
Cab Franc and the Slovenian oak too, but
yeah. The Chardonnay right now is super exciting for me. The hybrid that like just has a lot of acid, and a lot of things can be done to it that just haven't yet winemaking style wise. Like I haven't had a sparkling either in a pet nat or traditional method, and I have to believe that a Blanc de Blanc out of that would be as fire as a Blanc de Blanc from Chardonnay. And I what I really like is that there are a lot of farming practices that are starting to skew a lot less intervention wise. And so like I visited during Eno camp, we visited Afton Mountain, and we learned about like this kind of tea made of nettles and chamomile that's kind of being concocted and sprayed on vines. There's this compound that's essentially they were able to synthesize like clamshells into like a sprayable form, and there's some kind of protein in it that is helpful in like mitigating mold and mildew on vines. And so there are a couple of vineyards that are expanding that experiment. So I'm excited about that. Like even the Cab Franc that I mentioned at Grace Estate, they started this growing season planting a cow, what is it called, like an antler or whatever. I'm not from a cow, and like they're doing very biodynamic things, and so it's really interesting to see that we're at that wave of Virginia wine now, where people are exploring different farming practices that require a lot less inputs, from the viticulture side. So that, along with Chardonnay specifically, I think I'm personally most excited about. I'm like not in the anything but Chardonnay camp, by the way. I am squarely in the Chardonnay camp because Champagne, White Burgundy, mic drop.
When we talk about, the next generation of wine enthusiasts or wine connoisseurs, is there anything or anyone in Virginia looking at that younger demographic and maybe high school age, bringing them into the vineyards, teaching them about farming, agriculture? Is anyone concentrating on that space?
I don't know, but I know that there's some grants from the Young Farmers Association of America that I keep being sent by people, because people are saying to think about, they're like, are you thinking about this? I'm like, do y'all know that this is not my job yet? I don't, but Naya, are you aware of any high school or youth movements towards farming in your circles?
Yeah, I mean, 4-H has kind of always had a hold in this area, and that's big. I think the membership with 4-H is actually growing, but I think what I've been hearing about more is actually a return to home education, so that a lot of families of color are moving to Black-led homeschooling co-ops that have a focus on farming and agriculture and teaching outdoor skills. Earlier this week, I actually visited Triple C Camp, which is an outdoor summer camp outside of Charlottesville, and they're starting a year-round school program that is just about those things: how to forage, how to cultivate native plants, how to steward the land. And these are all aimed at the youth. So I think we're right at the beginning of that. And hopefully more programs will come around, especially those focused on Black and Brown communities,
Right.
And getting us kind of back out into nature and reconnected with the land.
So I also had a conversation with Chris Renfro recently as well, of the 280 Project, about connecting some efforts to Virginia and to Monticello as well, and exploring what 280 on the East Coast might look like as well. So there's some conversations that are definitely happening. And I just dropped a link in the chat that I was just sent recently. I haven't gotten a chance to explore it much in depth yet, but it is really about trying to get more young folks into farming as well. And I'm going to drop a link of another farm in Virginia that is definitely worth following. It's Black owned, and it is very progressive and amazing. Sylvan Aqua Farms, doing really good work.
And John Boyd is also doing great work. Thank you for that, Deanna. You know, but to circle back to Jamel's question, I think one of the things I'm most excited about is seeing people produce more fruit wines. I think more people are returning to making meads and ciders and fruit-based wines. That is really exciting. So Cunningham Creek, actually in Fluvanna County, has for several years now produced a strawberry wine. There's a vineyard in Nelson County that is exclusively fruit wines, and I'm blanking on the name of that place right now. But they have a blackberry wine, a pear, an apple, and some other things. And so I think there's a big opportunity here to get back into producing the types of wines that I think Black people have always produced, right? You know, to boost anything but vinifera, but you know, I think we've always been involved in that space. And so to see a return to that, I'm excited for.
So we usually leave some time at the end for questions. Also, guys, keep those restaurant recommendations coming in the chat for any of us who may be in the Virginia area sometime soon. That's always a good thing. Any questions? You can throw it in the chat or raise your hand.
I guess I had one more question. Obviously, like I love to see hybrids thrive. I love to see, you know, like you said, meads, ciders. Like obviously, there's a space for that. But I guess how has Virginia kind of navigated the like, oh, like this isn't wine, or like obviously hybrids obviously get this bad rep because they don't taste like vinifera. Obviously, it's not vinifera. Like we all know that. It's not, but how has, I guess, you guys seen Virginia as a whole kind of like disregard that narrative, or like, what do you guys do to just be like, no, like this is still dope juice?
You want to take that, Naya? Okay.
Sure. Well, yeah, dope juice is like threw me. I'm like, yep, it's dope juice. But you know, honestly, I think because Virginia is very young and scrappy at the moment, right? Like Virginia is definitely coming for the West Coast bag. And so many new people are getting into the industry. Places are opening left and right. I mean, I moved away from Charlottesville for 1 year and moved back, and there were at least 10 new vineyards. And so I think there's just such a frenzy around the industry at the moment that people are doing any and everything. Nothing is off limits. Everybody's ready to explore. Everybody's taking risks. And it's a super exciting time to be a producer or a grower in Virginia. And so, you know, I think some of the things that maybe hold back other wine regions that rely on those noble grapes to carry them, I think Virginia is just not beholden to that same restriction because everybody is trying to get a little piece of the action.
Completely agree. Like,
Is it
that's
mostly the younger demographic of producers?
no.
No, older? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Looking to try new things.
Yeah, I mean, because it's one of those things that like Virginia's wine industry isn't that old in the second iteration of it, really being from the 80s and 90s. And it seems like pretty early on, some folks were willing to adopt some of these hybrid grapes. I mean, people have been making Traminette for a really long time, often in a sweeter style. And Traminette is, if you think about Traminer, Gewürztraminer. It's like a hybrid of that, and so it tends to be aromatic, and can definitely be done in multiple styles, but including sweet. And so there are some of the hybrids that we've seen have lended towards making wines that like lend towards sweeter styles, like on the earlier end, and then they've become more dry as more producers start to make them in different styles as well, if that makes sense. And so it the hybrid piece feels normal for Virginia, from my perspective. There's this concept of asymmetric bets, where it's essentially kind of like balancing your portfolio and kind of looking for something with a high return. I feel like Virginia right now is just an asymmetric bet, in the sense that the upside is so much higher than it is for so many established wine regions. There's not nearly as much exponential growth opportunity in established wine regions as there is in Virginia. Like they can grow 2%, 3%. Virginia, it's up. Like it's the only way I know how to say it. I mean, there's so much opportunity here, in terms of
Do you feel like
exploring
winemakers are coming to Virginia?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, and honestly, a lot of the winemakers that we've been talking about like cut their teeth other places anyway, and then came back to Virginia. I mean, like folks came from Italy, folks worked in Burgundy, or are born and raised in Burgundy, or in the Northern Rhone in Côte-Rôtie, and decide to make wine here, after doing harvests all over the world. And a part of what appeals to them, and I think is why our industry is so creative, is that these are winemakers who absolutely could have thrived in those places, but they wanted a challenge. And they were like, this place is crazy to grow grapes in. Like the climate is trash, in terms of consistency, where like you'll have super hot, summers, and like you'll just get these super late rains, and you get these frosts that might happen around Mother's Day, like in 2020, and things like that, that just make it really difficult to farm. And that's exciting for a lot of people. And so people that are excited about that kind of thing are a little bit crazy, and are a little bit open to trying things that a lot of folks who want more consistency aren't willing to try. And so Virginia tends to attract people who are willing to take asymmetric bets. And so I think that all of those things are similar to how Silicon Valley started, minus all of the problematic everything in Silicon Valley. But in terms of like where all of these folks wanted to try new things, and then there was just concentration of people who are interested in exploring what's next and new, I think that that's the same thing that's happening in Virginia in a lot of ways too. And there are a lot of projects that, like, I mean, they're not my business to talk about, but like a lot of the folks that you all know are going to be producing Virginia wines over the next 2 years. I'll just leave it at that, and you'll start to see Instagram posts come out. So a lot of folks are doing some really cool stuff in Virginia. It's really cool.
Anyone else with any questions? Well, thank you guys so much. This has been amazing. There's been a wealth of information that was shared here tonight. And we look forward to just watching the Virginia area and all of the really, really cool things that are in the works. And we hopefully will all be able to come and visit some of the vineyards there sometime in the near future.
That sounds great. We want y'all to be a part of it too. Come through.
Yes.
Thanks for having us.
For sure. Thanks for having us.
Thank you guys. Well, guys, thank you. If there's no other questions, Reggie, you did post the slide in the chat, correct? Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I can email it to you so that it's easier for you to access, and you can feel free to send it out.
Okay. Yes, we can send that out. All right. Well, thank you guys.
Excellent.
And we will see everyone next time.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Peace.